July 6, 1943, 1:57 a.m. In the pitch-black waters of Kula Gulf, radar screens lit up like Christmas trees as Japanese destroyers raced through the night, their hulls packed with supplies for besieged troops on Guadalcanal. The USS Helena, veteran of Pearl Harbor and a dozen Pacific battles, charged into the darkness with guns already trained on the enemy. What happened next turned the sea into a cauldron of fire and steel. When the smoke cleared, Helena was gone. For 75 years, her final moments remained a mystery, buried beneath 3,000 feet of Pacific water. Then, in 2018, deep-sea explorers found her twisted remains and uncovered evidence that changes everything. The official record says enemy torpedoes sank her. But what really killed the most decorated light cruiser in the Pacific? And why did survivors speak in whispers about what they saw in those final minutes? Few ships in the United States Navy have packed as much combat into such a short career as the USS Helena. Commissioned in September 1939, she was a Brooklyn-class light cruiser, sleek, fast, and armed with 15 6-inch guns that could fire 10 rounds per minute. But it was not her specifications that made her legendary. It was what happened on December 7, 1941. That Sunday morning, the Helena was moored at Pearl Harbor's 1010 dock, outboard of the mine layer USS Oglala. At 7:57 a.m., the first wave of Japanese planes appeared overhead. Within minutes, a torpedo struck Helena below the waterline, blasting through the Oglala first. The explosion ripped a 40-foot gash in her side, but unlike many ships caught in their moorings that day, Helena's damage control parties reacted with remarkable speed. Chief Machinist's mate Donald Kirby Ross stayed at his post in the forward engine room, even as steam pipes ruptured around him. He was scalded, temporarily blinded, but refused to abandon his station. His heroism earned him the Medal of Honor, the first Medal of Honor awarded in World War II. While battleships burned around her, Helena's anti-aircraft batteries blazed away at Japanese planes. Her guns were among the first American weapons to fire in World War II, and they would not fall silent until her final night in July 1943. Despite severe damage, Helena survived Pearl Harbor while ships around her sank. Navy brass took notice. This was a warship that refused to die. After emergency repairs, Helena was back in action by early 1942, heading straight into the meat grinder of the Solomon Islands campaign. While most Americans today remember Guadalcanal for the brutal land fighting, naval historians remember it for something else: Iron Bottom Sound, the watery graveyard where dozens of American and Japanese warships now rest. Between August 1942 and February 1943, Helena fought in no fewer than 11 major engagements around Guadalcanal. The night battles were particularly terrifying affairs, ships maneuvering at point-blank range in complete darkness, firing at muzzle flashes and launching torpedoes on instinct rather than from targeting data. Helena developed a reputation during these battles. Her unique main battery fire control system allowed her to unleash devastatingly rapid salvos that Japanese sailors called machine gun cruiser fire. In the Battle of Cape Esperance on October 11 and 12, 1942, she pumped out shell after shell in such quick succession that other American captains thought she had caught fire. Lieutenant Commander Francis Maloney, who served as Helena's gunnery officer, later recalled that when they opened fire, it was like turning on a garden hose. The shells just poured out. That hose sprayed high explosive death across the decks of Japanese cruisers and destroyers throughout the Guadalcanal campaign. By early 1943, Helena had become something of a talisman in the Pacific Fleet. She had survived Pearl Harbor. She had survived Iron Bottom Sound when newer, stronger ships had gone down. Her crew was battle-hardened, and her captain was experienced. In February 1943, she became the first ship to receive the Navy Unit Commendation for outstanding heroism in action. But war takes its toll on ships just as it does on people. By July 1943, Helena had been in near-continuous combat operations for 19 months. Her hull showed the patched scars of multiple battles. Her crew, though professional, carried the psychological weight of too many night actions, too many near misses, and too many lost comrades on other vessels. On July 4, 1943, Helena received orders that would set her on course for destiny. Intelligence indicated that the Tokyo Express, the nickname for Japanese destroyer supply runs, would attempt to reinforce their garrisons on New Georgia. Task Force 18, including Helena and 2 other light cruisers, USS Honolulu and USS St. Louis, plus 4 destroyers, would intercept them in Kula Gulf. The night before the battle, Helena's executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Willis Rood, later claimed he oversaw the loading of several large crates onto the ship, unusual cargo that came with armed Marine guards and strict orders from naval intelligence. Decades later, surviving crew members would change the subject or fall silent. Whatever Helena carried that night in July 1943 was not listed in her manifest. The cargo was unlisted. The ship's final captain, Charles Cecil, gathered his officers in the wardroom that evening and reportedly told them, "Gentlemen, we have been lucky so far, but luck runs out for everyone eventually. Tomorrow night we make our own luck." None of them realized how prophetic those words would be. July 5th passed in tense preparation. Helena's crew went through their battle station's drill with the mechanical precision that comes from repetition and survival. Gunners checked their weapons. Engineers monitored the 4 Parsons turbines that could push the cruiser to 33 knots. Radio men tuned their equipment, listening for Japanese transmissions. And in the Combat Information Center, radar operators watched their screens with the intensity of men who knew their shipmates' lives depended on their vigilance. As darkness fell, Task Force 18 entered Kula Gulf from the south. The narrow channel between Kolombangara and New Georgia Islands created a perfect choke point, ideal for an ambush in either direction. The Americans were betting they would see the Japanese first. At 1:36 a.m. on July 6th, they got their wish. Helena's radar picked up multiple contacts at 26,000 yards, just under 15 miles. The Japanese force consisted of 10 destroyers, larger than intelligence had suggested. Helena signaled Admiral Walden Ainsworth on the flagship Honolulu. The battle was on. The American ships increased speed and maneuvered to cross the Japanese T, a classic naval tactic placing their full broadside against the enemy's narrow bow profile. At 1:57 a.m., Admiral Ainsworth gave the order to commence firing when ready. Helena's guns opened up first. In the pitch blackness, her rapid-fire salvos created a continuous strobe effect, illuminating the Japanese destroyers in frozen snapshots of horror. The enemy ships, caught by surprise, began evasive maneuvers. 2 Japanese destroyers, the Nizuki and Nagatsuki, took multiple hits in the opening minutes. The Nizuki, leading the Japanese formation, erupted in flames visible for miles. But Japanese Imperial Navy destroyers carried weapons American sailors had learned to fear above all others: long lance torpedoes. Far superior to American torpedoes of the time, these oxygen-propelled weapons could travel at 50 knots for up to 40,000 yards. They left no bubble trail and carried warheads twice as powerful as their American counterparts. At 2:03 a.m., lookouts on Helena spotted torpedo wakes approaching from the direction of the burning Nizuki. Captain Cecil ordered an emergency turn to avoid them, but it was too late. The first torpedo struck Helena amidships, near the forward engine room. The explosion lifted the 10,000-ton cruiser partially out of the water. Seconds later, a second torpedo hit forward, near the bow. The damage was catastrophic. Helena's keel buckled from the twin impacts. Compartments flooded instantly. Power failed throughout the forward sections of the ship. In the CIC, radar screens went dark. The ship developed a 15-degree list to starboard within minutes. Survivors later described what happened next with conflicting details. Official records state that a third torpedo hit at approximately 2:04 a.m., breaking the ship's back. But some survivors insisted something else occurred, something that did not match the pattern of a torpedo strike. Radio Man Second Class James Flanagan was one of the last men to transmit from Helena before she sank. His final message, cut off mid-sentence, was, "Taking heavy torpedo damage. List increasing. Wait, some things..." The transmission ended there. Whatever Flanagan saw in those final moments would remain his secret. His body was never recovered. By 2:05 a.m., the USS Helena had broken into 3 sections. The bow sank almost immediately. The stern section remained afloat for several minutes longer, allowing some crew members to escape. The center section, containing most of the ship's vital spaces, rolled over and sank at approximately 2:07 a.m. Of the 900 men aboard, 168 went down with the ship. The remainder found themselves floating in warm, dark water filled with burning oil, debris, and most terrifyingly, sharks. The Battle of Kula Gulf continued to rage around them as destroyer captains faced the impossible choice between continuing to fight or stopping to rescue survivors. USS Nicholas and USS Radford eventually broke off from the battle to pick up Helena's men. But the rescue was far from complete. Currents swept many survivors toward Japanese-held Kolombangara Island. A group of 88 men would spend 2 days hiding from Japanese patrols before being rescued in a daring operation involving PT boats and the submarine USS Gato. In the confusion and horror of that night, several survivors reported seeing unusual phenomena in Helena's final moments. Chief Petty Officer Raymond Henley told debriefers he saw a blue-white light, brighter than any flare, emanating from midships just before the final breakup. 3 other survivors mentioned a strange vibration, unlike anything they had felt during previous torpedo hits. These details were conspicuously absent from the official Navy report on Helena's loss. News of Helena's sinking reached Pearl Harbor on July 7, 1943. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, ordered an immediate investigation. The preliminary findings were straightforward. Helena had been sunk by 3 Japanese torpedoes during a night action in Kula Gulf. The ship had fought valiantly until the end. Her loss, while tragic, was a case of straightforward combat attrition. But behind closed doors, questions multiplied. Why had naval intelligence officers boarded Helena hours before her final battle? Why were certain survivors separated from others during debriefing? And why did the Navy classify portions of Helena's sinking report at a higher level than other combat losses? Families received the standard telegram that began with the words, "The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you that your son or husband was lost in action in the service of his country." Gold stars appeared in windows across America. Helena became another statistic in the grinding calculus of Pacific warfare. 1 cruiser lost in exchange for several Japanese destroyers damaged or sunk. The survivors were quickly reassigned to other vessels. Those who asked questions about the unusual circumstances surrounding Helena's final moments found themselves transferred to remote postings or desk jobs far from the fighting front. The message was clear. The official story was the only story. By late 1943, larger events had overshadowed Helena's loss. American forces were island hopping across the Pacific. New, more powerful warships had joined the fleet. The tide of war had turned decisively against Japan. In this atmosphere of increasing victory, few had reason to question the circumstances of a single cruiser's sinking months earlier. But the questions never entirely disappeared. In 1946, as part of the general declassification of wartime records, historian Samuel Eliot Morison reviewed the Helena file for his monumental history of United States naval operations in World War II. He noted several discrepancies, but ultimately he supported the official torpedo theory. In private correspondence with the Navy Department, Morrison asked why certain records remained classified, when the war had been over for nearly a year. Through the 1950s and the 1960s, Helena survivors held periodic reunions. At these gatherings, after sufficient drinks and away from recording devices, some would speak in hushed tones about that night. They told of unusual equipment installed days before the battle. They spoke of compartments they were not allowed to enter. They spoke of officers they had never seen before, joining the crew temporarily. They spoke of a mission beyond the interception of Japanese destroyers. One persistent rumor involved radar technology. In 1943, American radar was still relatively primitive, but according to Chief Electronics Technician Walter Crane, who survived Helena's sinking, the ship had been fitted with an experimental radar system far more advanced than anything officially in service. Crane claimed this system could detect not just surface ships, but also submerged submarines, technology that would not officially exist until the Cold War. Other survivors spoke of unusual hydrographic equipment installed in Helena's hold, devices for mapping underwater features with unprecedented precision. The waters around the Solomon Islands held strategic importance beyond the immediate Pacific campaign, sitting astride potential deep water routes between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Whatever secrets Helena carried sank with her that night. As decades passed, her survivors aged, memories faded or became embellished. The ship herself became a footnote in naval history books, remembered primarily by specialists and the families of those who served aboard her. For 75 years, Helena rested undisturbed in the depths of Kula Gulf, beyond the reach of human eyes, until 2018. March 23, 2018. The research vessel Petrel floated above the dark waters of Kula Gulf. Funded by the late Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, Petrel had already located dozens of famous shipwrecks, including USS Indianapolis and the Japanese battleship Musashi. Now her crew turned their attention to finding Helena. Using historical records and accounts from survivors, they narrowed the search area to approximately 11 square miles of seabed. Petrel's advanced multi-beam sonar began scanning the ocean floor, penetrating over 3,000 feet of water to map the seafloor in extraordinary detail. On the second day of searching, at 4:17 p.m., the sonar operator noticed an anomaly. A large, clearly man-made object broken into 3 distinct sections. The dimensions matched Helena perfectly. The crew erupted in restrained celebration, the kind that comes from professionals who understand the solemn nature of their discovery. This was not just a shipwreck. It was a war grave. The next morning, Petrel launched her remotely operated vehicle, ROV. The submersible descended through the water column, powerful lights illuminating a path through the darkness. At 2,821 feet below the surface, the cameras on the ROV captured the first images of Helena seen by human eyes in 3/4 of a century. The wreck lay in 3 pieces, confirming survivor accounts. The bow section rested upright, its distinctive pointed prow still intact. The stern section lay 400 yards away, rolled onto its starboard side. Between them, the central section, containing the engine rooms, the combat information center, and most of the ship's vital spaces, rested inverted on the seafloor. But it was what the ROV found next that raised questions about the official sinking narrative. The damage patterns on Helena's hull did not entirely match what would be expected from torpedo strikes alone. Naval engineers and marine archaeologists examining the footage noted that while 2 torpedo hit locations were clearly visible, the damage that supposedly split the ship in 2 showed characteristics more consistent with an internal explosion. Robert Kraft, director of subsea operations for the Petrel, said they had seen dozens of torpedo-damaged wrecks and that the break pattern on Helena was unusual. The hull plating was peeled outward in a pattern that suggested something exploded from within, not from an external torpedo impact. More puzzling still was what the ROV found in Helena's communications room. Despite 75 years underwater, several pieces of equipment remained recognizable and did not match known configurations of World War II-era naval radio rooms. One device in particular caught the attention of naval technology historians, a cylindrical unit with unusual antenna connections that resembled signal processing equipment, not developed until the 1950s. As the Petrel ROV explored the wreck, it documented unexpected modifications to Helena's hull structure. Investigators recorded compartments that did not appear on her blueprints, reinforced bulkheads in areas that would not normally require such strengthening, and mounting points for equipment that had long since been removed. The most telling discovery came when the ROV examined Helena's keel near the central breakpoint. There, clearly visible, despite decades of marine growth, was evidence of a specialized compartment built into the lowest part of the hull, a feature absent from every known technical drawing of Brooklyn-class cruisers. When these findings were published, the U.S. Navy responded with a carefully worded statement saying that USS Helena was lost to enemy torpedo action on July 6, 1943, and that while the Navy appreciated the discovery of the historic vessel, it cautioned against speculation regarding modifications that may have been made for wartime operational requirements. This bureaucratic language did little to quiet growing questions. Several Helena survivors, now in their late 90s, broke their long silence. Raymond Davidson, a former fire controlman who had been 19 when Helena sank, stated in a 2019 interview, "We were carrying something important that night, something the Japanese were not supposed to know about, and something even most of the crew did not know about. When those torpedoes hit, whatever it was, it went up too." Declassified documents from the Naval Technical Mission to Japan, released in full only in 2012, revealed that in mid-1943, the U.S. had captured critical Japanese naval codebooks from a destroyer sunk near the Solomon Islands. These codebooks were being transported back for analysis when Helena was lost. But this does not explain the modified compartments or the advanced technology found on the wreck. More intriguing is a partially redacted 1947 memo from the Office of Naval Research referencing materials recovered from CL-50 operation being transferred to Project Rainbow facilities for further analysis. Project Rainbow was not the Philadelphia experiment, as urban legend suggests. It was a very real, classified program developing advanced radar countermeasures. What Helena was truly carrying that night remains classified. What we do know is that the physical evidence from her wreck contradicts the simple torpedo narrative that has stood unchallenged for 3/4 of a century. The USS Helena was not just another warship lost in the Pacific campaign. She was carrying secrets worth classifying for decades, secrets that may have contributed to her destruction, and secrets that her survivors were instructed never to reveal. As we look at the haunting, remotely operated vehicle footage of Helena today, resting in her dark Pacific grave, we are left with questions that may never be fully answered. Was she carrying experimental radar technology that later helped win the war? Was she on a covert hydrographic mission mapping potential submarine routes? Or was she transporting intelligence materials so valuable that their loss was concealed behind the convenient narrative of combat attrition? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. The men who died aboard Helena that night in July 1943 gave their lives not just in a surface battle against Japanese destroyers, but in service to classified operations that remained hidden long after the war ended. Their sacrifice deserves to be remembered, even if the full nature of their mission remains obscured by time, depth, and national security. The sea keeps her secrets well, but sometimes, if we look closely enough, she offers us glimpses of truth from the darkness. If you are as fascinated by naval mysteries and deep-sea discoveries as we are at ocean attacks, hit subscribe and dive deeper with us. New videos every week uncover the secrets that history left behind on the ocean floor. From World War II wrecks to Cold War submarines, we are bringing the past back to the surface, one shipwreck at a time. What other secrets lie buried in the Pacific depths? Join us to find out.